The fluorescent lights in the parking garage flickered like dying stars as Maya Chen walked toward her Honda Civic. Her nursing shift at Denver General had run 12 hours long, and exhaustion weighed heavy on her shoulders. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The underground garage echoed with the distant hum of ventilation systems and the occasional drip of condensation from the concrete ceiling above. She fumbled for her keys in her oversized purse, muscle memory guiding her through the familiar routine. Another double shift, another day of saving lives, while her own seemed to drift by in a haze of medical charts and 4 drips. At 28, Maya had built what everyone considered a successful life. Registered nurse, downtown apartment, steady income. Her grandmother would have been proud of how well she had integrated into the modern world. The footsteps behind her were soft, almost silent, but Maya's senses had been trained long ago to detect the slightest disturbance. She continued walking at the same pace, her breathing remaining steady while her mind catalogued the approaching threat. Male, approximately 200 pounds based on the weight distribution in his steps, trying to move quietly but failing to mask the slight drag of his left foot. Amateur. Maya reached her car and pretended to struggle with the lock, using the reflection in the window to track the man's approach. He was 20 feet away now, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. His right hand was reaching into his jacket pocket. Weapon. Most likely a knife based on the size and shape of the outline. She had 2 choices. Run and hope to reach the security office before he caught her, or handle the situation the way her grandmother had taught her during those summers on the reservation. The way her Apache ancestors had handled threats for centuries before the modern world tried to make them forget who they truly were. The man was 10 feet away when he made his move. "Don't scream and don't turn around," he whispered, his voice rough with either cigarettes or alcohol. "Just give me your purse and your keys and nobody gets hurt." Maya almost laughed, almost. Instead, she slowly raised her hands, letting her purse fall to the ground with a soft thud. "Please, don't hurt me," she said, her voice trembling with manufactured fear. "I have children at home." She didn't have children. She barely had a social life. But predators like this one fed on perceived vulnerability, and Maya had learned long ago that sometimes the best defense was to let your enemy believe they held all the power. The man stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the beer on his breath and the stale cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. His left hand reached for her shoulder while his right remained in his jacket pocket, presumably still gripping whatever weapon he had brought to this encounter. "That's a good girl," he said, his voice taking on an ugly, satisfied tone. "Now turn around nice and slow and let me see what else you might be hiding." Maya turned, and in that moment, the carefully constructed facade of Maya Chen, registered nurse and model citizen, fell away like a discarded costume. What faced the would-be attacker was something much older, much more dangerous, and infinitely more capable than he could have imagined. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory as clearly as if the old woman were standing beside her in the parking garage. "The warrior's greatest weapon is not strength or speed, but the enemy's assumption of weakness. Let them think they know who you are, granddaughter, and then show them how wrong they can be." The man's eyes widened as he took in Maya's transformed stance. Her shoulders had squared, her center of gravity had lowered, and something in her dark eyes promised violence if he continued down his chosen path. But he was committed now, either too drunk or too stupid to recognize that the situation had fundamentally changed. He lunged forward with his right hand, pulling a switchblade from his jacket pocket in a clumsy arc aimed at her midsection. Maya sidestepped the attack with fluid grace, her body moving with the controlled precision of someone who had spent years learning to read an opponent's intentions before they even knew them themselves. Her left hand caught his wrist, controlling the weapon while her right hand struck his throat with surgical precision. Not hard enough to crush his windpipe, but sufficient to send him into a fit of gasping and choking. The knife clattered to the concrete floor as his grip loosened involuntarily. "Wrong woman," Maya said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of generations of warriors who had defended their people against impossible odds. "Very wrong woman." The attacker stumbled backward, one hand clutching his throat while his eyes bulged with shock and growing fear. This wasn't how these encounters were supposed to go. He was supposed to be in control. He was supposed to be the predator. Maya picked up the switchblade and closed it with a practiced flick of her wrist. She had seen weapons like this before, during her summers with her grandmother on the Mescalero Apache reservation in New Mexico. Cheap steel, poorly balanced, the kind of blade that looked intimidating to civilians but would break under real combat conditions. "You have 10 seconds to walk away," she continued, her voice remaining calm and level. "Use them wisely." The man stumbled toward the exit, casting terrified glances over his shoulder as he disappeared into the stairwell leading to street level. Maya waited until she could no longer hear his footsteps before allowing herself to relax. The encounter had lasted less than 2 minutes, but it had awakened something inside her that she had been trying to suppress for years. She retrieved her purse and keys, her hands perfectly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. As she unlocked her car, Maya caught her reflection in the window again. For just a moment, she could see her grandmother's face looking back at her. Strong, proud, uncompromising. Everything Maya had tried not to be in her pursuit of a normal, safe, invisible life. The drive to her apartment took 20 minutes through Denver's late-night traffic, but Maya's mind wasn't on the road. She was thinking about the look in the attacker's eyes when he realized she wasn't what he had expected. Fear mixed with confusion, the dawning understanding that he had made a fundamental miscalculation about the nature of his intended victim. It wasn't the first time Maya had been forced to defend herself, though it had been several years since the last incident. Growing up, her grandmother had insisted on training her in the old ways, the traditional combat techniques that Apache warriors had refined over centuries of conflict. "The world may try to make you forget who you are," the old woman had said during one particularly intensive training session, "but your enemies will remind you when the time comes." Maya parked in the underground garage of her apartment building and took the elevator to the 8th floor. Her one-bedroom unit was sparse but comfortable, decorated with a few pieces of traditional Apache pottery and a single photograph of her grandmother, taken shortly before her death 5 years earlier. The old woman stood in front of their family's traditional homeland in the mountains of New Mexico, her weathered hands resting on a wooden staff that had been passed down through 4 generations of their family. She poured herself a glass of wine and settled onto her couch, trying to process what had happened in the hospital parking garage. The encounter itself had been routine, almost mundane in its simplicity. A predator had chosen the wrong target and paid the price for his mistake. But something about the incident felt different, significant in a way that Maya couldn't quite articulate. Her cell phone buzzed with a text message from her sister Anna, who lived in Albuquerque and worked as a social worker for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. "Haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. Everything okay up in the big city?" Maya started to type her usual response about being busy with work, but stopped. Instead, she found herself typing, "Had an interesting night. Some guy tried to mug me in the parking garage." The response came back almost immediately. "Are you hurt? Did you call the police?" "I'm fine. Handled it myself. Didn't seem worth involving the cops." "Handled it how?" Maya hesitated. Anna knew about their grandmother's training, but they rarely discussed it. Both sisters had chosen to pursue careers and lives that kept them far from the reservation and the old ways. Anna had thrown herself into social work and advocacy, while Maya had focused on medicine and healing. Neither had expected to need their grandmother's more martial lessons. "The usual way," Maya finally replied. "Remember summers with Grandma?" "Jesus, Maya, are you sure you're okay? Maybe you should stay with someone tonight." "I'm fine, Anna, really. Just brought back some memories." After ending the text conversation, Maya sat in her living room sipping wine and staring at her grandmother's photograph. The old woman's eyes seemed to hold a knowing expression, as if she had foreseen this moment and approved of how her granddaughter had handled the situation. Maya's grandmother, Elena Crowfeather, had been one of the last Apache women to receive traditional warrior training from the elders who had fought in the Fadva, Apache wars of the late 19th century. She had passed those skills to her granddaughter not out of nostalgia or cultural preservation, but out of a pragmatic understanding that the world remained a dangerous place for Apache women, regardless of how successfully they might integrate into mainstream society. "Your enemies will not care about your nursing degree or your downtown apartment," Elena had told Maya during their final training session, just months before her death. "When they come for you, and they will come, you must be ready to show them who you truly are." Not Maya Chen, the nurse, but Maya Crowfeather, granddaughter of warriors, keeper of the old knowledge. Maya had taken her grandmother's surname after her death, a gesture that had puzzled her colleagues at the hospital, but felt necessary to honor the woman who had raised her after her parents' death in a car accident when she was 12. Elena Crowfeather had been the strongest, most formidable person Maya had ever known, a woman who could track a deer through 40 miles of desert terrain, identify edible plants in complete darkness, and kill a man with her bare hands if the situation required it. The wine was making her philosophical, Maya realized. She finished the glass and prepared for bed, going through her usual routine of checking locks and windows. Living alone in the city required certain precautions, though tonight those precautions felt more significant than usual. As she brushed her teeth, Maya found herself examining her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 5 feet 6 inches, she was tall for an Apache woman, with the lean build that came from years of distance running and rock climbing. Her black hair was currently cut in a professional bob that looked appropriate in the hospital environment, though she sometimes missed the long braids her grandmother had insisted she wear as a child. Her dark eyes held flecks of gold that became more pronounced when she was angry or excited, a genetic trait that Elena had claimed came from their warrior ancestors. "You have your great-great-grandmother's eyes," Elena had often said. She was the one who fought alongside Geronimo during the final campaign, the one who refused to surrender even when the rest of the band was captured. "She would be proud of who you've become, granddaughter, even if you've forgotten some of what she taught us." Maya had never forgotten. She had simply chosen to lock that part of herself away, to build a life where such knowledge wasn't necessary. Tonight's encounter had been a reminder that the choice might not always be hers to make. She slept poorly, her dreams filled with images of desert landscapes and the sound of her grandmother's voice recounting stories of the old days. Maya found herself reliving training sessions from her childhood, practicing techniques she hadn't used in years while Elena's voice provided commentary and correction. "Violence is a tool, granddaughter, nothing more and nothing less. Those who fear it become victims. Those who embrace it become monsters. The warrior's path is to understand it completely while using it only when necessary. Tonight, it was necessary. You chose correctly." Maya woke before dawn feeling more rested than she had in months, despite the interrupted sleep. She prepared for her morning run through the downtown Denver streets, a routine she had maintained for the past 3 years. Running had always been meditation for her, a way to clear her mind and connect with something larger than the confined spaces of hospital rooms and urban apartments. As she laced up her running shoes, Maya's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She let it go to voicemail, but when she played the message back, her blood ran cold. "Ms. Chen, a male voice said, using her professional surname rather than the crow feather name she had legally adopted. "My name is Detective Jack Morrison with the Denver Police Department. I'd like to speak with you about an incident that occurred last night in the parking garage at Denver General Hospital. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." Maya stared at the phone, her mind racing through possible explanations. Had the attacker gone to the police? Was she being investigated for assault? Did they have security camera footage of the encounter? She called the number back, and Detective Morrison answered on the second ring. "Ms. Chen, thank you for returning my call. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." "Not at all, Detective. Your message mentioned something about last night?" "Yes, we had a man come into the station around midnight claiming he'd been attacked by a woman in the hospital parking garage. He had some injuries to his throat and was pretty shaken up. We're trying to piece together what happened." Maya chose her words carefully. "I was leaving work around 11:30. There was a man in the garage who appeared to be following me. When I reached my car, he approached me with what looked like a weapon." "And what happened then?" "I defended myself." Detective Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Ms. Chen, the man we spoke with claimed you attacked him without provocation. He says you used some kind of martial arts techniques to injure him. Detective, are you familiar with the Colorado Self-Defense Act? If someone approaches me with a weapon in a deserted parking garage, I have the legal right to defend myself using reasonable force." "Absolutely. And I'm not suggesting you did anything wrong. In fact, the man's story had some inconsistencies that made us question his credibility. But I was hoping we could meet in person to go over the details. Sometimes these encounters can escalate, and I want to make sure you're not in any additional danger." Maya agreed to meet Detective Morrison at a coffee shop near the hospital in 2 hours. After ending the call, she abandoned her plans for a morning run and instead spent the time researching Jack Morrison online. The Denver Police Department website showed him to be a 15-year veteran with commendations for community policing and violence prevention. His photograph showed a man in his early 40s with graying brown hair and intelligent blue eyes. The coffee shop was busy with the morning rush when Maya arrived, but she spotted Detective Morrison immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with good sight lines to both entrances, a habit that suggested either police training or personal paranoia. He stood when she approached, extending his hand in greeting. "Ms. Chen, Jack Morrison? Thank you for meeting with me." Up close, Detective Morrison was taller than his photograph suggested, probably 6 feet even, with the kind of lean build that came from regular exercise rather than gym workouts. His handshake was firm but not aggressive, and his eyes held the direct gaze of someone accustomed to reading people quickly and accurately. "Please call me Maya," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "And thank you for being willing to meet like this rather than asking me to come to the station. This seemed more appropriate given the circumstances. Can I get you coffee?" As Detective Morrison went to the counter, Maya observed his movement and posture. He walked with the controlled economy of motion that suggested military or law enforcement training, but there was something else underneath that caught her attention. He scanned the room constantly, noting exits and potential threats with the kind of unconscious awareness that went beyond normal police training. He returned with 2 cups of coffee and a notepad, though he didn't immediately reach for the latter. "So," he said, settling back into his chair, "tell me what happened last night." Maya recounted the events in the parking garage, providing enough detail to establish her credibility while leaving out the more specific aspects of how she had handled the attacker. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or making notes. "The man who came to us," he said when she finished, "his name is Tommy Brennan. He's got a record going back 15 years. Assault, robbery, drug possession. Last night wasn't his first time targeting women in parking garages. Are you planning to charge him?" "That depends on several factors. His injuries were consistent with defensive wounds, and his story kept changing every time we questioned him. Plus, we found a switchblade in the hospital parking garage near where you said the encounter took place. Detective Morrison leaned forward slightly. Maya, can I ask you something off the record? She nodded. Where did you learn to fight like that? The question hung in the air between them. Maya studied Detective Morrison's face, looking for signs of suspicion or judgment, but found only genuine curiosity. My grandmother taught me some self-defense techniques when I was growing up, she said finally. She believed women should be able to protect themselves. Your grandmother must have been quite a teacher. Tommy Brennan outweighs you by at least 70 pounds, and from what he described, you handled him like he was a child. Sometimes size isn't the most important factor in a confrontation. Detective Morrison smiled. No, I suppose it isn't. Maya, I'm not here to investigate you for defending yourself against an armed attacker. But I am concerned that Tommy Brennan might not be done with this. Men like him don't handle being humiliated well, especially by someone they perceive as an easy target. Are you suggesting I should be worried about retaliation? I'm suggesting you should be careful. Tommy runs with a crew of similar types. They're not sophisticated criminals, but they can be persistent when their pride is wounded. Maya thanked Detective Morrison for the warning and his professional handling of the situation. As they prepared to leave, he handed her his business card. Call me if anything unusual happens, he said. And Maya? Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. Walking back to her car, Maya reflected on the conversation. Detective Morrison had been professional and respectful, but she sensed he suspected there was more to her story than simple self-defense techniques learned from a grandmother. His comment about her grandmother being a remarkable woman suggested he had done some research on her background, though she wasn't sure how much he might have discovered. Maya Crow Feather was not a difficult person to research for someone with law enforcement resources. Born on the Mescalero Apache Reservation, raised by her grandmother after her parents' death, educated at the University of New Mexico before moving to Denver for nursing school. On paper, she was exactly what she appeared to be, a successful Native American woman who had built a career in healthcare while maintaining connections to her cultural heritage. What wouldn't appear in any official records was the true extent of Elena Crow Feather's influence on her granddaughter's education. The old woman had been far more than a traditional grandmother offering cultural guidance and support. She had been a warrior in the truest sense of the word, trained by the last generation of Apache fighters who had resisted American expansion into their homeland. Elena's knowledge hadn't come from books or museums, but from direct transmission of techniques and strategies that had kept Apache people alive during centuries of warfare against overwhelming odds. She had passed that knowledge to Maya not as historical curiosity, but as practical skills that might someday mean the difference between life and death. As Maya drove back to her apartment, she found herself thinking about Detective Morrison's warning regarding Tommy Brennan and his associates. In her grandmother's worldview, enemies who were defeated but not eliminated often returned with reinforcements and better planning. The old woman would have advised settling the matter permanently rather than allowing it to escalate. But Maya lived in a different world now, one where such permanent solutions carried consequences that extended far beyond the immediate threat. She was a registered nurse with a professional reputation and a life built on helping people rather than eliminating them. The warrior skills her grandmother had taught her were meant to be a last resort, not a first option. Still, as she parked in her apartment building's garage, Maya found herself scanning the area with heightened awareness. If Tommy Brennan and his friends were planning some form of retaliation, they would likely target her at predictable locations. Her apartment, her workplace, the routes she traveled between them. They weren't sophisticated criminals, but they didn't need to be sophisticated to cause serious problems for someone trying to maintain a normal life. Maya spent the afternoon researching Tommy Brennan online. using techniques her grandmother had taught her for gathering intelligence about potential threats. Alina Crowfeather had understood that information was often more valuable than weapons, that knowing your enemy's capabilities and intentions could prevent conflicts before they began. Tommy Brennan's social media presence painted a picture of a man who took pride in his criminal lifestyle. Photographs showed him with various associates, all displaying the kind of casual criminality that suggested regular involvement in theft, drug sales, and violence. His posts contained frequent references to settling scores and never backing down from confrontations. More concerning were the recent posts suggesting he was angry and humiliated about something, though he didn't provide specific details. The most recent entry, posted just hours after his encounter with Maya, simply said, "Some people gonna learn they picked the wrong fight." Maya screenshot the relevant posts and forwarded them to Detective Morrison with a brief message explaining her concerns. His response came back within minutes. "Thanks for sending these. We'll keep an eye on the situation. Remember what I said about being careful." That evening, Maya called her sister Anna in Albuquerque. After updating her on the police investigation, she asked a question that had been bothering her since the previous night. "Anna, do you ever think about Grandma's training? About the things she taught us?" "Sometimes. Why?" "Last night, when that guy attacked me, it all came back so naturally. Like I'd been practicing every day instead of ignoring it for years." Anna was quiet for a moment. "Maya, Grandma always said the warrior spirit doesn't disappear just because we choose not to use it. She said it would be there when we needed it, whether we wanted it or not. Do you think she was right to teach us those things? Sometimes I wonder if we would have been better off just learning regular self-defense like other people." "Maya, regular self-defense wouldn't have saved you last night. And it wouldn't have saved me when that drunk tried to grab me outside the community center last year." Maya sat up straighter. "Anna, you never told me about that. Because I handled it the way Grandma taught us to handle threats. And because I knew you'd worry if I told you that Grandma's lessons are still relevant in our modern, civilized world." They talked for another hour about their grandmother's training and the ways it continued to influence their lives, even when they tried to distance themselves from it. Anna admitted she had used Elena's tracking and observation techniques in her social work, particularly when dealing with potentially dangerous domestic violence situations. "Grandma didn't teach us to be killers," Anna said as their conversation wound down. "She taught us to be survivors. There's a difference." That night, Maya slept better than she had in months. Her dreams were filled not with violence or conflict, but with memories of her grandmother's voice explaining the deeper philosophy behind Apache warrior training. Elena had emphasized that true strength came not from the ability to inflict harm, but from the wisdom to know when harm was necessary and the skill to apply it efficiently when that moment arrived. The next morning brought a new challenge. Maya arrived at work to find Detective Morrison waiting in the hospital lobby, his expression grim. "Maya, we need to talk," he said. "Tommy Brennan was found dead in an alley downtown this morning. Single gunshot wound to the head, execution style." Maya felt her world shift. "Are you here to arrest me?" "No, Tommy was killed around 3 a.m., and we've already verified your whereabouts through hospital security cameras and your apartment building's key card system. But his death changes everything about your situation." "What do you mean?" Detective Morrison gestured toward a quiet corner of the lobby. "Tommy wasn't killed by you or because of your encounter with him. He was killed because he'd become a liability to some much more dangerous people. People who might now view you as a witness to something you don't even know you witnessed." Maya stared at Detective Morrison, trying to process what he had just told her. Tommy Brennan was dead, murdered by someone with the skills and resources to execute a professional killing. The man who had attacked her just 2 nights ago was now lying in the city morgue with a bullet in his head. "Detective, I need you to explain what you mean about witnessing something," Maya said, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. I was in that parking garage for maybe 5 minutes total. I saw Tommy, I defended myself, and I left. What could I have possibly witnessed that would make someone want to kill him? Morrison pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph taken at the crime scene. Tommy Brennan's body lay crumpled in an alley between two downtown buildings. But what caught Maya's attention was the location itself. She recognized the street from her daily commute to work. This alley is 3 blocks from the hospital, Morrison continued. Tommy was found at approximately 3:15 this morning by a homeless man looking for a place to sleep. The killer used a .22 caliber weapon, single shot to the base of the skull. Professional execution, the kind used by organized crime to send a message. Maya studied the photograph more carefully. The alley was narrow, barely wide enough for a delivery truck, with high brick walls on both sides. No windows, no security cameras visible. The perfect location for someone who wanted to kill without witnesses. Detective, are you suggesting that Tommy's attack on me was connected to whatever got him killed? I'm suggesting that the timing is too convenient to ignore. Tommy Brennan was small-time muscle, the kind of guy who robs drunk college students and elderly women walking alone at night. He wasn't connected to the kind of people who order professional hits. But something changed in the 48 hours between your encounter and his death. Morrison put his phone away and leaned forward, his expression becoming more serious. Maya, I need to ask you some questions that might seem unrelated to what happened in the parking garage. Have you noticed anyone following you over the past few weeks? Any unusual phone calls or strange encounters at work? Maya thought back through the past month, searching her memory for anything that might have seemed significant at the time. Her life was routine almost to the point of monotony. Work, home, grocery store, occasional dinner with colleagues. She lived quietly and deliberately, avoiding the kind of attention that might complicate her carefully constructed normal existence. Nothing comes to mind, she said finally. My life is pretty predictable. Same schedule every week, same routes, same people. What about patients at the hospital? Anyone who might have taken unusual interest in you personally? Detective, I work in the cardiac intensive care unit. Most of our patients are elderly or recovering from major surgery. They're not in any condition to be stalking nursing staff. Morrison nodded, making notes in his small pad. What about family members? Visitors who might have paid you particular attention? Maya paused, thinking about the dozens of family members she encountered every week. People dealing with sick relatives often became emotional and sometimes fixated on the medical staff they perceived as responsible for their loved one's care. But nothing stood out as particularly unusual or threatening. There was one man last week, she said slowly. His father was admitted after a massive heart attack. The son seemed very interested in the hospital security procedures, asking questions about shift changes and parking arrangements. I thought it was just nervous energy at the time. Do you remember his name? Martinez, I think. Luis Martinez. His father was Roberto Martinez, room 412. Morrison wrote down the names. What kind of questions was he asking specifically? Maya closed her eyes, trying to recall the conversation. He wanted to know what time the nursing staff changed shifts, whether we parked in the same garage every day, if there were security guards on duty overnight. I told him we had standard hospital security, nothing more specific than that. And how did he respond? He seemed satisfied with the information. Said he was worried about his father's safety and wanted to make sure the hospital was secure. Maya opened her eyes, looking directly at Morrison. Detective, are you thinking Luis Martinez was somehow connected to Tommy Brennan? I'm thinking that professional killers don't usually waste time on small-time robbers, unless there's a bigger picture involved. And I'm thinking that your encounter with Tommy might have been more than random chance. The implications of Morrison's suggestion began to sink in. If Tommy's attack hadn't been a random mugging, if he had been specifically targeting her for reasons she didn't understand, then his death might be connected to those same unknown reasons. Maya, I need you to think very carefully about this question, Morrison said. Is there anything in your background, your family history, or your personal life that might make you a target for criminal organizations? Maya felt her grandmother's training kick in automatically. When faced with questions about personal history from law enforcement, Alina Crowfeather had taught her to reveal only what was absolutely necessary while maintaining credibility. The key was to provide enough truth to satisfy curiosity without exposing vulnerabilities that could be exploited later. My family has lived in New Mexico for generations, she said carefully. We're Mescalero Apache, but we've never been involved in anything criminal. My grandmother raised me after my parents died, and she was very focused on education and staying out of trouble. What about your work with the tribe? Any involvement in land disputes or casino operations? I left the reservation for college when I was 18 and haven't been back except for visits. I work as a nurse detective. I save lives, I don't take them. Morrison studied her face for a moment, and Maya had the distinct impression he was evaluating not just her words, but her body language and emotional responses. She kept her expression neutral and her posture relaxed, techniques Elena had taught her for dealing with interrogations. Maya, I believe you're telling me the truth about not being involved in anything criminal, Morrison said finally. But someone targeted you specifically, and they used Tommy Brennan to do it. When Tommy failed and got arrested, he became a liability that needed to be eliminated. So what happens now? Am I in danger from whoever killed Tommy? That depends on what they were trying to accomplish by targeting you in the first place. If they just wanted to rob you, then Tommy's death probably closes that chapter. But if they were trying to kidnap you or eliminate you as a threat to something, then they'll likely try again with more competent people. Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The thought of being hunted by professional criminals was terrifying, but also familiar in a way that surprised her. Alina Crowfeather had spent years teaching her granddaughter how to recognize and evade various types of human predators, from individual stalkers to organized groups with sophisticated resources. Detective, what do you recommend I do? Short term, vary your routine. Don't go to the same places at the same times every day. Park in different locations, take different routes to work. Long term, we need to figure out why someone would target a cardiac nurse from New Mexico. Morrison handed her another business card, this one with his personal cell phone number written on the back. Call me immediately if anything unusual happens. And Maya, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, don't ignore that feeling. After Morrison left, Maya sat in the hospital cafeteria trying to process everything she had learned. Tommy Brennan's murder had transformed what she thought was a simple self-defense situation into something far more complex and dangerous. Someone with professional resources had targeted her specifically, and when their plan failed, they had eliminated the evidence with an execution-style killing. She pulled out her phone and called Anna in Albuquerque, needing to hear her sister's voice and get her perspective on the situation. Maya, what's wrong? Anna said immediately upon answering. You sound terrible. The man who attacked me is dead. Murdered last night by someone the police think might be connected to organized crime. Anna was quiet for a long moment. Maya, you need to come home. Right now. Pack a bag and drive to Albuquerque today. I can't just leave my job. I have patients depending on me, responsibilities. You'll have more responsibilities if you're dead. Maya, this sounds exactly like the kind of situation Grandma warned us about. Sometimes people become targets not because of what they've done, but because of who they are or what they represent. Maya knew her sister was right, but the thought of abandoning her carefully constructed life in Denver was almost as frightening as the possibility of being hunted by criminals. She had spent 10 years building her career and establishing herself as a respected member of the hospital staff. Running away would mean starting over, possibly never being able to return. Anna, what if I'm overreacting? What if Tommy's death was just a coincidence and I'm not actually in any danger? Then you'll have taken a week of vacation and visited your sister. But if you're not overreacting, if someone really is targeting you, then leaving Denver could save your life. After ending the call with Anna, Maya returned to her shift in the cardiac intensive care unit. She tried to focus on her patients and their medical needs, but found herself constantly scanning the hallways for unfamiliar faces or anyone who seemed to be paying unusual attention to her activities. Around noon, she received a visit from Luis Martinez, the man who had been asking questions about hospital security the previous week. His father had been discharged 2 days earlier, supposedly recovered enough to continue his rehabilitation at home. There was no medical reason for Luis to be at the hospital. "Nurse Chen," he said, approaching her at the nurse's station. "I wanted to thank you again for taking such good care of my father during his stay." Maya studied Luis more carefully than she had during their previous encounters. He was probably in his mid-30s, average height and build, with the kind of forgettable appearance that would make him difficult to identify in a lineup. But his eyes held an alertness that seemed inconsistent with a grateful family member making a courtesy visit. "You're very welcome, Mr. Martinez. How is your father doing at home?" "Much better, thank you. The doctor said his recovery has been remarkable for someone his age." Luis smiled, but the expression didn't reach his eyes. "I was wondering if I could ask you a few more questions about cardiac rehabilitation procedures." "Of course, though you might want to speak with his primary physician about specific medical advice." Luis pulled out a small notebook and pen, as if he were preparing to take detailed notes. "I'm particularly interested in the long-term care protocols. What happens to patients who don't respond well to standard treatment?" The question struck Maya as odd. Roberto Martinez had responded extremely well to treatment, making a faster recovery than most patients half his age. There was no medical reason for his son to be asking about non-responsive patients. "Mr. Martinez, every patient is different. If you have concerns about your father's specific condition, I really think you should discuss them with his cardiologist." "Of course, you're absolutely right." Luis put away his notebook, but continued to stand at the nurse's station. "Nurse Chen, can I ask you a personal question?" Maya felt her grandmother's training engage automatically. The shift in Luis's tone and body language triggered alarms that had been carefully calibrated by years of Elena's instruction. This was no longer a casual conversation between a nurse and a grateful family member. "What kind of personal question?" "Do you live alone?" "I asked because my father was concerned about your safety after hearing about the problems in the hospital parking garage recently." Maya's blood ran cold. There had been no public reports about Tommy Brennan's attack in the parking garage. The only people who knew about the incident were herself, Detective Morrison, and the hospital security staff. Luis Martinez should have no knowledge of what had happened 2 nights ago. "I'm not sure what you mean about problems in the parking garage," Maya said carefully. "Oh, maybe I misunderstood. My father mentioned hearing something about a nurse being bothered by someone in the parking area. I thought it might have been you since you were his primary caregiver. Your father was discharged before any such incident occurred. Mr. Martinez, he wouldn't have heard about parking garage problems from hospital staff." Luis's smile faltered slightly, and Maya saw something dangerous flicker behind his eyes. He had made a mistake, revealed knowledge he shouldn't possess, and now he was trying to calculate how to recover from the error. "You're absolutely right, of course. I must have gotten my information confused. Perhaps it was something I heard from another family member who works in healthcare." Maya nodded politely, but her mind was racing. Luis Martinez was connected to Tommy Brennan's attack somehow, and possibly to his murder as well. The questions about hospital security during his father's stay had been reconnaissance, gathering information that could be used to plan an assault on her. "Well, Mr. Martinez, I should get back to my patients. Please give my regards to your father and tell him I'm glad he's recovering so well." "Of course." "And Nurse Chen, Please be careful in the parking garage. I've heard it can be dangerous for women alone at night." After Luz left, Maya immediately called Detective Morrison and reported the encounter. He listened without interrupting, then asked her to meet him in the hospital security office immediately. The security office was located in the basement of the hospital, behind a door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Maya had never been inside before, but Detective Morrison was waiting for her along with the head of hospital security, a retired police sergeant named Williams. "Maya, I need you to look at some surveillance footage," Morrison said without preamble. "We pulled video from the past week showing Luis Martinez during his visits to see his father." Williams activated a computer monitor showing multiple camera angles from throughout the hospital. The first clip showed Luis entering through the main lobby on the day his father was admitted, looking appropriately worried and distressed for someone dealing with a family medical emergency. "Now watch this," Williams said, fast-forwarding to clips from later visits. The difference was striking. Instead of going directly to his father's room, Luis could be seen wandering through various sections of the hospital, paying particular attention to security cameras and staff work areas. He spent considerable time observing the nurses' station and the cardiac unit, noting which nurses worked which shifts and how they interacted with patients. "He was conducting surveillance," Morrison said. "Learning your routine, your schedule, your habits. This wasn't random, Maya. Someone hired Luis Martinez to gather intelligence about you specifically." The final clip showed Luis leaving the hospital on the day before Tommy Brennan's attack, but instead of using the main exit, he could be seen walking toward the parking garage. The camera angle wasn't sufficient to show exactly where he went, but the timing and direction strongly suggested he had been scouting the location, where Tommy would later attempt his assault. "Detective, how do we find Luis Martinez?" Maya asked. "The address he gave when his father was admitted could be fake. We're already working on that. Roberto Martinez was a real patient with a real medical condition, but the son who claimed to be Luis might not be who he said he was. We're running fingerprints from surfaces he touched in the hospital and checking immigration and employment records." Williams pulled up another screen showing a map of Denver with various red dots marking locations. "These are all the places Luis Martinez visited during his father's hospital stay, based on credit card transactions and security camera footage. He wasn't just gathering intelligence about you, Maya. He was learning the entire area around the hospital." Maya studied the map, recognizing several locations she frequented regularly. Her grocery store, the coffee shop where she often stopped before work, the gym where she maintained her membership but rarely used. Luis had been building a comprehensive profile of her daily life and routine activities. "There's something else," Morrison said, pulling out his phone. "We got preliminary results from Roberto Martinez's medical records. His heart attack was real, but it was caused by a rare type of toxin that's not naturally occurring. Someone poisoned him deliberately." The implications hit Maya like a physical blow. Luis Martinez hadn't been at the hospital because his father was sick. He had been there because his father had been poisoned as part of a plan to get Luis inside the hospital where he could conduct surveillance on Maya without suspicion. "So Roberto Martinez was a victim too," Maya said. "They poisoned him to create a reason for his son to spend time at the hospital. That's what we think. Roberto is recovering well because we treated the symptoms of his heart attack without knowing about the underlying poisoning. But Luis used his father's condition as cover for a sophisticated intelligence operation." Williams leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. "Maya, this level of planning and resources suggests we're dealing with a professional organization. They poisoned an innocent man to create access to their target, conducted detailed surveillance over multiple days, and when their initial attack failed, they eliminated their asset with a professional killing." Maya felt the walls of her carefully constructed normal life crumbling around her. Someone with significant resources and criminal connections wanted her dead or kidnapped, and they were willing to poison innocent people and commit murder to achieve their goal. Her quiet life as a Denver nurse was over, whether she wanted to accept that reality or not. Detective Morrison, what do you recommend I do now? Honestly? Disappear. Take vacation time, leave Denver, go somewhere these people can't find you while we try to figure out who they are and what they want. And what if you never figure it out? What if I can't ever come back? Morrison was quiet for a moment, studying her face. Maya, can I ask you something? And I need you to be completely honest with me. She nodded. Your reaction to all this information has been remarkably calm. Most people in your situation would be panicking, crying, demanding police protection. You're processing this like someone who's been trained to handle dangerous situations. Who exactly was your grandmother, and what kind of self-defense did she teach you? Maya realized she had reached a decision point. She could continue trying to maintain her cover story about basic self-defense training, or she could trust Detective Morrison with the truth about her background and capabilities. Given the level of threat she was facing, maintaining her civilian facade might actually make her more vulnerable rather than protecting her. Detective, my grandmother was Elena Crowfeather, and she was one of the last traditionally trained Apache warriors. She taught me skills that go far beyond basic self-defense. Morrison leaned forward, his expression becoming more alert. What kind of skills? Tracking, surveillance detection, wilderness survival, hand-to-hand combat, weapons training, tactical planning. Maya paused, then added, and how to kill people when necessary. The room fell silent. Williams and Morrison exchanged glances, both men clearly re-evaluating their assessment of the woman sitting across from them. Maya, Morrison said finally, are you telling me that you're essentially a trained guerrilla fighter who's been working as a nurse? I'm telling you that my grandmother prepared me for situations exactly like this one. She always said that enemies would eventually come, and when they did, I would need to be ready to defend myself and my family using whatever methods were necessary. Morrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. When he turned back, his expression was thoughtful rather than shocked. Maya, what would your grandmother advise you to do in this situation? Maya closed her eyes, channeling Elena Crowfeather's voice and wisdom. The old woman's teachings had been very clear about how to handle organized threats from enemy groups. She would tell me to gather intelligence about my enemies, eliminate the immediate threats, and then strike at the source of the problem before they could reorganize and try again. And how would she suggest you do that? Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at Detective Morrison. By becoming the hunter instead of the hunted. The abandoned warehouse district stretched along the South Platte River like a graveyard of industrial ambitions. Maya crouched behind a rusted shipping container, her breathing controlled and silent as she observed the building where Luis Martinez had been tracked. 3 days of careful surveillance had revealed patterns in the criminal organization's operations, and tonight she would begin dismantling their network piece by piece. Detective Morrison had initially resisted her plan to take offensive action against her pursuers, but the discovery of additional victims had changed his perspective. Roberto Martinez wasn't the only innocent person who had been poisoned to facilitate surveillance operations. The criminal organization had used similar tactics against at least 6 other targets over the past year, leaving a trail of hospitalized family members and murdered assets across Denver. Maya adjusted the small communication device in her ear, maintaining contact with Morrison, who was positioned in an unmarked police vehicle 3 blocks away. The detective had reluctantly agreed to provide backup and coordination, though he remained uncomfortable with Maya's unconventional approach to solving the problem. Target building shows minimal activity, Maya whispered into her throat microphone. 2 guards visible on the ground floor, 1 additional sentry on the roof. Vehicle traffic suggests approximately 8 to 10 people inside. Morrison's voice crackled through the earpiece. Maya, remember that we need at least one of them alive for interrogation. Try to avoid turning this into a massacre. Maya smiled grimly. Her grandmother's teachings emphasized precision and efficiency over unnecessary violence. Elena Crowfeather had always stressed that a true warrior eliminated threats while minimizing collateral damage and preserving opportunities for intelligence gathering. The building housing Luis Martinez and his associates was a 3-story brick structure that had once served as a furniture warehouse. Now it functioned as a safe house and operational base for criminal activities, ranging from identity theft to contract killing. Maya had spent 2 days learning its layout, guard rotations, and the habits of its occupants. She moved silently between the shipping containers and abandoned vehicles that littered the industrial area, her approach guided by techniques Elena had learned from Apache raiders who had successfully evaded capture by the U.S. Army for decades. Every step was calculated to avoid detection, every pause timed to coincide with ambient noise that would mask any sound she might make. The first guard was positioned near a side entrance, smoking cigarettes and checking his phone with the casual attention of someone who didn't expect trouble. Maya observed him for 10 minutes, noting his patrol pattern and identifying the optimal moment for neutralization. When he turned away to extinguish his cigarette, she moved. The guard never saw her coming. Maya's approach was silent and swift, covering the final 20 feet in seconds. Her left arm encircled his throat while her right hand covered his mouth, cutting off both air and sound before he could raise an alarm. The pressure point technique Elena had taught her rendered him unconscious in less than 30 seconds, without causing permanent injury. Maya dragged the unconscious guard behind a dumpster and secured him with zip ties she had brought for the purpose. She took his radio and weapon, a cheap semi-automatic pistol that suggested these criminals operated on limited resources rather than the sophisticated equipment she had initially feared. First guard neutralized, she reported to Morrison. Moving to secondary position. The roof sentry presented a more complex challenge. Maya needed to reach the fire escape without being observed from either ground level or the building's windows. She used the shadows cast by streetlights and the surrounding structures, timing her movement to avoid the sweep pattern of the rooftop guard's flashlight. Climbing the fire escape required absolute silence. Each rung of the metal ladder was tested before applying her full weight, and Maya paused frequently to listen for any change in the guard's behavior. Her grandmother had taught her that patience was often more valuable than speed, that rushing led to mistakes that could prove fatal. The rooftop guard was leaning against the building's parapet, more focused on his smartphone than his surveillance duties. Maya approached from his blind spot, using an air conditioning unit for cover until she was within striking distance. This time she used a different technique, applying pressure to nerve clusters that would cause temporary paralysis without unconsciousness. "Please don't move," Maya whispered as the guard's body went rigid. "I'm not here to kill you, but I will if you force me to. Not if you understand." The guard managed a slight nod, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. Maya paused, then added, "And how to kill people when necessary." The room fell silent. Williams and Morrison exchanged glances, both men clearly reevaluating their assessment of the woman sitting across from them. "Maya," Morrison said finally, "are you telling me that you're essentially a trained guerrilla fighter who's been working as a nurse?" "I'm telling you that my grandmother prepared me for situations exactly like this one. She always said that enemies would eventually come, and when they did, I would need to be ready to defend myself and my family using whatever methods were necessary." Morrison stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. When he turned back, his expression was thoughtful rather than shocked. "Maya, what would your grandmother advise you to do in this situation?" Maya closed her eyes, channeling Elena Crowfeather's voice and wisdom. The old woman's teachings had been very clear about how to handle organized threats from enemy groups. She would tell me to gather intelligence about my enemies, eliminate the immediate threats, and then strike at the source of the problem before they could reorganize and try again. "And how would she suggest you do that?" Maya opened her eyes and looked directly at Detective Morrison. By becoming the hunter instead of the hunted. The abandoned warehouse district stretched along the South Platte River like a graveyard of industrial ambitions. Maya crouched behind a rusted shipping container, her breathing controlled and silent as she observed the building where Luis Martinez had been tracked. 3 days of careful surveillance had revealed patterns in the criminal organization's operations, and tonight she would begin dismantling their network piece by piece. Detective Morrison had initially resisted her plan to take offensive action against her pursuers, but the discovery of additional victims had changed his perspective. Roberto Martinez wasn't the only innocent person who had been poisoned to facilitate surveillance operations. The criminal organization had used similar tactics against at least 6 other targets over the past year, leaving a trail of hospitalized family members and murdered assets across Denver. Maya adjusted the small communication device in her ear, maintaining contact with Morrison, who was positioned in an unmarked police vehicle 3 blocks away. The detective had reluctantly agreed to provide backup and coordination, though he remained uncomfortable with Maya's unconventional approach to solving the problem. "Target building shows minimal activity," Maya whispered into her throat microphone. 2 guards visible on the ground floor, 1 additional sentry on the roof. Vehicle traffic suggests approximately 8 to 10 people inside. Morrison's voice crackled through the earpiece. "Maya, remember that we need at least one of them alive for interrogation. Try to avoid turning this into a massacre." Maya smiled grimly. Her grandmother's teachings emphasized precision and efficiency over unnecessary violence. Elena Crowfeather had always stressed that a true warrior eliminated threats while minimizing collateral damage and preserving opportunities for intelligence gathering. The building housing Luis Martinez and his associates was a 3-story brick structure that had once served as a furniture warehouse. Now it functioned as a safe house and operational base for criminal activities ranging from identity theft to contract killing. Maya had spent 2 days learning its layout, guard rotations, and the habits of its occupants. She moved silently between the shipping containers and abandoned vehicles that littered the industrial area, her approach guided by techniques Elena had learned from Apache raiders who had successfully evaded capture by the U.S. Army for decades. Every step was calculated to avoid detection, every pause timed to coincide with ambient noise that would mask any sound she might make. The first guard was positioned near a side entrance, smoking cigarettes and checking his phone with the casual attention of someone who didn't expect trouble. Maya observed him for 10 minutes, noting his patrol pattern and identifying the optimal moment for neutralization. When he turned away to extinguish his cigarette, she moved. The guard never saw her coming. Maya's approach was silent and swift, covering the final 20 feet in seconds. Her left arm encircled his throat while her right hand covered his mouth, cutting off both air and sound before he could raise an alarm. The pressure point technique Elena had taught her rendered him unconscious in less than 30 seconds without causing permanent injury. Maya dragged the unconscious guard behind a dumpster and secured him with zip ties she had brought for the purpose. She took his radio and weapon, a cheap, semi-automatic pistol that suggested these criminals operated on limited resources rather than the sophisticated equipment she had initially feared. "First guard neutralized," she reported to Morrison. Moving to secondary position. The roof sentry presented a more complex challenge. Maya needed to reach the fire escape without being observed from either ground level or the building's windows. She used the shadows cast by streetlights and the surrounding structures, timing her movement to avoid the sweep pattern of the rooftop guard's flashlight. Climbing the fire escape required absolute silence. Each rung of the metal ladder was tested before applying her full weight, and Maya paused frequently to listen for any change in the guard's behavior. Her grandmother had taught her that patience was often more valuable than speed, that rushing led to mistakes that could prove fatal. The rooftop guard was leaning against the building's parapet, more focused on his smartphone than his surveillance duties. Maya approached from his blind spot, using an air conditioning unit for cover until she was within striking distance. This time she used a different technique, applying pressure to nerve clusters that would cause temporary paralysis without unconsciousness. "Please don't move," Maya whispered as the guard's body went rigid. "I'm not here to kill you, but I will if you force me to. Not if you understand." The guard managed a slight nod, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. "The client wanted you taken alive and transported to a specific location." Maya felt her blood run cold. The criminal organization hadn't been trying to kill her initially. Someone wanted her kidnapped and delivered for purposes she could only imagine were worse than simple murder. "Where were you supposed to take me?" "Warehouse in Commerce City. Industrial area near the airport." "But lady, you need to understand something. The people who hired us, they're not going to stop just because you eliminated our crew. They'll send someone else, someone more professional." "Who are they?" Luis shook his head. "I told you we don't get names. But the money comes from out of state, probably organized crime from back east. Big money, the kind of payment that suggests your kidnapping is worth millions to someone." Maya processed this information while maintaining her guard against potential threats from elsewhere in the building. If Luis was telling the truth, then eliminating his local crew would only buy her temporary safety. The real threat came from whoever had hired them, and those people would simply find new assets to complete their mission. "Luis, I need the contact information for your intermediaries. Phone numbers, email addresses, meeting locations, anything that might lead me to the people who hired you." "Are you insane? If I give you that information and they find out, they'll kill me and everyone in my family." Maya stepped closer to Luz's desk, allowing him to see the absolute determination in her eyes. "If you don't give me that information, I'll kill you right now and find it myself. At least if you cooperate, you'll live long enough to disappear somewhere your employers can't find you." Louis stared at her for a long moment, clearly trying to assess whether she was bluffing about her willingness to commit murder. Maya let him see the truth in her expression. She wasn't bluffing. Alina Crowfeather had taught her that some threats required elimination to protect innocent people, and a criminal organization that poisoned fathers to facilitate kidnapping operations definitely qualified for permanent removal. "There's a phone in the desk drawer," Louis said finally. "Burner phone with the contact numbers. The next check-in call is scheduled for tomorrow at noon. If we miss that call, they'll know something went wrong." Maya retrieved the phone and scrolled through its contact list. 3 numbers, all with area codes from different states. No names, just numerical designations that suggested a sophisticated operational security protocol. "What happens during these check-in calls?" "Status reports. Progress on current contracts, requests for additional resources, payment confirmations. Standard criminal business management." "And what were you supposed to report about my case?" Luis looked sick. "That we had successfully captured the target and were requesting pickup instructions." Maya felt anger building in her chest, but forced herself to maintain professional calm. Getting emotional during tactical operations led to mistakes that could compromise the mission. Elena had taught her to channel anger into focused determination rather than allowing it to cloud her judgment. "Luis, you're going to make that check-in call tomorrow, exactly as scheduled. But instead of reporting success, you're going to request additional time due to complications with the target's security situation. They won't believe that. The contract specified a 2-week timeline, and we're already past the deadline. Then you'll have to be very convincing. Because if that call doesn't buy me additional time to track down your employers, you and your entire crew are going to have much bigger problems than missed deadlines." Maya heard footsteps in the hallway outside the office. Someone was approaching, probably wondering why Lise had been quiet for so long. She motioned for him to remain silent while positioning herself behind the door where she would be concealed when it opened. "Luis, everything okay in there?" A voice called in Spanish. Maya pressed the pistol against Luz's temple and whispered, "Tell him you're on an important phone call and don't want to be disturbed." Luis complied, his voice carefully controlled despite the obvious fear. The footsteps retreated, but Maya knew she had limited time before someone became suspicious enough to investigate further. "I need the address of the warehouse in Commerce City where you were supposed to deliver me." Luis provided the address, along with details about the facility's layout and security measures. The information painted a picture of a sophisticated operation with multiple holding cells and equipment for interrogation or worse. Maya realized she had stumbled into something far larger than a simple kidnapping plot. How many other people has your organization delivered to that warehouse? Over the past year? Maybe a dozen. Different clients, different reasons. Some were business disputes, some were personal vendettas. We don't ask questions about what happens after delivery. Maya felt sick thinking about the innocent people who had been tortured or killed in that warehouse because criminals like Luis Martinez were willing to kidnap anyone for the right price. Elena's teachings had been clear about the warrior's obligation to protect innocent people from predators, even when doing so required personal risk. "Luis, you and your people are going to shut down this operation immediately. You're going to return any money you've been paid for active contracts, and you're going to disappear from Denver permanently. If I find out you've hurt anyone else after tonight, I'll track you down and finish this conversation in a much less pleasant manner. Lady, you can't just shut down a criminal organization by threatening one crew chief. There are dozens of people involved in this network, most of them much more dangerous than my team. Then I'll deal with them one at a time until the network doesn't exist anymore." Maya zip-tied Luis to his chair and gagged him with duct tape, ensuring he couldn't raise an alarm until she had completed her mission. She searched his desk and found additional documentation about the criminal organization's structure and activities. The scope was staggering, with connections to organized crime families in 3 different states and contracts worth millions of dollars. She photographed the most important documents with her phone and forwarded them to Detective Morrison, providing law enforcement with intelligence that could potentially dismantle the entire network through legal channels. But Maya knew that prosecuting criminals was a slow process that might take years, and she couldn't afford to spend years looking over her shoulder while her enemies regrouped. The other men in the building had to be neutralized before they realized something was wrong and escaped to report back to their superiors. Maya moved through the 2nd floor methodically, using techniques Elena had taught her for clearing hostile structures without alerting remaining enemies. The first room contained the 2 men she had observed earlier counting money. Maya used a combination of surprise and superior training to neutralize both men within seconds, leaving them unconscious but alive. Elena had always emphasized that unnecessary killing created more enemies and complicated operations that could be resolved through tactical superiority. The 3rd floor presented a different challenge. The music she had heard earlier was coming from a room where 3 men were playing cards and drinking beer. They were armed and alert enough that a direct approach would likely result in gunfire that could compromise her mission and endanger Detective Morrison's backup position. Maya decided to use psychological warfare instead of direct confrontation. She cut the power to the building, plunging the interior into darkness while maintaining her advantage through superior night vision training and familiarity with the layout. The card players immediately became agitated, calling out to their colleagues and trying to re-establish communication. In the darkness and confusion, Maya was able to neutralize the 3 men using techniques that relied on sound, touch, and spatial awareness rather than visual targeting. Each man was rendered unconscious before he could identify the source of the attack or raise an effective alarm. With all 8 members of the criminal crew neutralized, Maya secured the building and conducted a thorough search for additional intelligence. She found computer equipment containing records of dozens of criminal operations, weapons caches that suggested preparation for major violence, and communication logs that revealed connections to organized crime networks across the country. "Building secure," she reported to Morrison. 8 subjects neutralized, substantial intelligence recovered. Requesting backup for prisoner processing and evidence collection. Morrison's response indicated that he had been monitoring police communications and coordinating with federal law enforcement agencies. Maya's operation had uncovered criminal activity that extended far beyond Denver's jurisdiction, requiring investigation by agencies with national resources and authority. "Maya, FBI and ATF units are en route to your location. They want to interview you about the intelligence you've recovered and discuss your methods for gathering it." "Detective, I think we both know that my methods wouldn't be approved by federal agencies. I suggest we focus on the intelligence value rather than the collection techniques." "Understood. But Maya, you need to understand that what you've uncovered tonight is going to generate a lot of attention from law enforcement, agencies that might want to recruit you or restrict your activities." Maya considered Morrison's warning while securing the final pieces of evidence she needed to track down the people who had hired Luis Martinez's organization. The federal agencies would be focused on prosecuting the criminals she had captured, but they would also want to control her involvement in future operations. Alina Crowfeather's teachings had included extensive discussion of dealing with government authorities who might view Apache capabilities as either assets to be exploited or threats to be contained. The old woman had emphasized the importance of maintaining independence while cooperating with legitimate law enforcement when their goals aligned with protecting innocent people. "Detective Morrison, I appreciate your concern, but I have unfinished business with whoever hired these people to kidnap me. Federal agencies can prosecute the criminals I captured tonight, but they can't protect me from the next crew that gets sent to complete the original contract." "Maya, what are you planning to do?" "I'm planning to follow my grandmother's advice about dealing with enemies who threaten the safety of innocent people. Sometimes the only way to stop a predator is to become a more effective predator yourself." As Maya prepared to leave the warehouse before federal agents arrived, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. The quiet nurse who had wanted nothing more than to save lives and avoid complications had been transformed into someone willing to hunt criminals across multiple states to protect herself and other potential victims. Alina Crowfeather would have been proud of her granddaughter's evolution, but also concerned about the personal cost of embracing the warrior path. Maya knew that once she crossed certain lines, she could never return to the simple life she had built in Denver. The choice wasn't really a choice at all, though. Her enemies had made the decision for her when they decided she was expendable. The warehouse in Commerce City would be her next target, but first she needed to prepare for a much more dangerous operation. The people who had hired Luis Martinez wouldn't make the same mistakes twice, and Maya would need every skill Elena had taught her to survive what was coming next. The Commerce City warehouse loomed against the pre-dawn sky like a monument to industrial decay. Maya had been observing the facility for 18 hours, learning its rhythms and identifying weaknesses in what appeared to be a sophisticated security operation. This wasn't the amateur setup she had dismantled at Luis Martinez's safe house. The people running this facility understood operational security and had invested significant resources in protecting their criminal enterprise. Detective Morrison crouched beside her in the abandoned building they were using as an observation post, his binoculars focused on the warehouse's main entrance. The federal investigation triggered by Maya's intelligence had revealed connections to organized crime families in Chicago, Detroit, and Miami, but prosecuting those connections would take months or years. Maya couldn't afford to wait for the legal system to provide protection she needed immediately. "Security rotation changed guards 15 minutes ago," Morrison whispered. "That gives us a 4-hour window before the next shift change." "But Maya, I'm still not comfortable with this plan. If something goes wrong in there, backup is 20 minutes away minimum." Maya adjusted her tactical vest. checking the placement of equipment she had acquired through channels that Detective Morrison preferred not to know about. Federal agencies had been surprisingly cooperative about providing intelligence regarding the warehouse facility, though they had made it clear that any direct action would be unauthorized and potentially criminal. "Detective, my grandmother always said that waiting for perfect conditions is how warriors die of old age without ever fighting their battles. Sometimes you have to act with the information you have rather than the information you want." The warehouse intelligence painted a disturbing picture of criminal operations extending far beyond simple kidnapping. The facility served as a processing center for human trafficking victims, a torture chamber for extracting information from business rivals, and a disposal site for people who had become inconvenient to various criminal enterprises. Maya estimated that dozens of innocent people had died in that building over the past 2 years. Elena Crowfeather's teachings had been explicit about the warrior's obligation to protect innocent people from predators, even when doing so required personal risk and potential sacrifice. Maya couldn't walk away from this facility knowing that more victims would be processed through its operations while she focused on her own safety. "Movement on the east side," Morrison reported. "Black SUV approaching the loading dock." Maya shifted her binoculars to observe the vehicle. 3 men emerged, 2 carrying what appeared to be an unconscious person wrapped in a tarp. The timing was coincidental but significant. Someone was being delivered to the warehouse for processing while Maya was preparing her assault on the facility. "Detective, that changes everything. There's someone alive in that building who needs immediate help." Morrison lowered his binoculars and looked at Maya directly. "You can't save everyone. If we wait for federal backup, we can coordinate a proper raid that might rescue multiple victims instead of risking everything on one person. And how many people will be killed while we're coordinating federal backup? How many victims will disappear before bureaucrats finish filling out paperwork?" Maya's frustration was building, but she forced herself to channel that energy into tactical planning rather than emotional reaction. Elena had taught her that anger was useful fuel for determination, but dangerous guidance for decision-making. The warehouse facility covered approximately 50,000 square feet across 2 levels, with multiple entrances and a complex internal layout that included offices, storage areas, and what intelligence suggested were holding cells for victims. Maya had identified 17 people working in the building during various shifts, with core security provided by 8 armed guards who rotated through 4-hour cycles. "Maya, I need you to understand something," Morrison said quietly. "If you go into that building and people die, even bad people, there will be consequences. Federal agencies are already asking questions about your methods and capabilities. This operation could put you on watch lists that might restrict your freedom permanently." "Detective, I've been on someone's watch list since I was 12 years old. My grandmother made sure of that when she taught me skills that most people don't learn outside military special operations training. The only difference now is that I'm choosing to use those skills instead of pretending I don't have them." Maya began her approach to the warehouse using terrain features and abandoned vehicles for concealment. The industrial area surrounding the facility provided excellent cover for someone trained in stealth movement, but also offered multiple escape routes for defenders who knew the area better than she did. The loading dock where the SUV had delivered its human cargo was protected by 2 guards, both armed with automatic weapons that suggested professional training rather than street-level criminality. Maya observed their patrol pattern and communication procedures, noting that they maintained radio contact with interior security every 15 minutes. She needed to neutralize the exterior guards without alerting the interior team, then penetrate the building and locate the victim who had just been delivered. The operation required perfect timing and absolute silence, with no margin for error that might compromise her mission or endanger innocent lives. Maya chose a position behind a shipping container that provided concealment, while offering multiple approach routes to the loading dock. Elena's training had emphasized the importance of maintaining tactical flexibility, never committing to a single plan when circumstances could change rapidly. The first guard was eliminated using a technique Elena had learned from Apache raiders who specialized in capturing enemy sentries without raising alarms. Maya approached from his blind spot during a radio check, applied pressure to specific nerve clusters that caused immediate unconsciousness, and secured him with zip ties before he could recover. The second guard presented a more complex challenge because his position offered better visibility of the surrounding area. Maya had to wait for him to investigate his colleague's disappearance, then neutralize him when he discovered the unconscious guard. The timing was critical, with only seconds available before he could radio for backup. Both guards were secured behind shipping containers where they wouldn't be discovered during routine security checks. Maya acquired their radios and weapons, giving her access to internal communications and superior firepower for the building penetration phase. "Guard post secure," she reported to Morrison through her earpiece. Beginning interior infiltration. The loading dock entrance led directly into the warehouse's main floor, a vast space filled with shipping containers and industrial equipment. Maya could hear voices from the upper level and machinery operating somewhere deeper in the building. The recent delivery was probably being processed in one of the holding areas she had identified through intelligence analysis. Maya moved through the ground floor systematically, avoiding areas where her presence might be detected while gathering real-time intelligence about the facility's operations. She discovered additional victims in shipping containers that had been converted into holding cells, confirming that this was indeed a major hub for human trafficking and other criminal activities. The victims were primarily women and children, all showing signs of prolonged imprisonment and abuse. Maya felt rage building in her chest as she observed the conditions these innocent people had endured, but forced herself to maintain tactical discipline. Emotional reactions during operations led to mistakes that could endanger the very people she was trying to protect. She located the recent delivery in a container near the building's center. The victim was a young woman, probably in her 20s, who appeared to have been drugged but was still breathing. Maya checked for life-threatening injuries while listening for approaching footsteps that might indicate discovery. "Female victim located on ground floor," she reported to Morrison. "Alive but drugged, requires immediate medical attention. Maya, can you extract her without alerting the security team?" Maya evaluated the tactical situation. Moving an unconscious person through the warehouse without detection would be extremely difficult, and attempting extraction might alert the security team to her presence before she could neutralize the remaining threats. Elena's teaching suggested that sometimes the best way to protect victims was to eliminate their captors entirely. Negative on extraction. Too many guards, too much exposure. I need to neutralize the security team first, then coordinate mass evacuation of all victims. Maya secured the unconscious woman with additional concealment and began moving toward the upper level where most of the facility's personnel were located. The stairs leading to the second floor were exposed and well lit, requiring a different approach than the ground-level infiltration. She found an alternative route through a maintenance area that included service ladders and utility passages. The climb was challenging and noisy, but provided access to the upper level without using the primary stairwell where guards might detect her presence. The second floor contained offices, communication equipment, and what appeared to be interrogation rooms. Maya could hear conversations in multiple languages, suggesting that the criminal organization was international in scope rather than simply regional. The implications were disturbing, indicating that her personal situation was connected to criminal networks operating across multiple countries. Maya located the facility's command center, where 3 men were monitoring security cameras and coordinating various criminal operations through encrypted communications. Neutralizing them would blind the remaining security team while providing her access to intelligence about the organization's broader structure and activities. The command center assault required coordination of multiple simultaneous actions. Maya used smoke grenades to create confusion, then neutralized all 3 operators before they could raise an alarm or destroy critical intelligence. The operation took less than 90 seconds, but provided her with control of the facility's security systems. "Command center secured," she reported to Morrison. "I have access to their communication systems and security cameras. Beginning systematic neutralization of remaining personnel." Using the security camera network, Maya could observe the positions and activities of the remaining guards throughout the facility. The smoke from her assault on the command center had triggered alarm systems, but the guards didn't yet understand that they were dealing with a single intruder, rather than a coordinated law enforcement raid. Maya used their confusion to her advantage, moving through the building and neutralizing guards individually while they were separated and disoriented. Elena's training had included extensive practice in exploiting enemy confusion and communication failures during tactical operations. The final confrontation occurred in the facility's main office, where the operation commander was attempting to destroy computer records and coordinate evacuation procedures. Maya arrived as he was preparing to eliminate witnesses, including several victims who had been brought to the office for interrogation. "Step away from the computer and put your hands where I can see them," Maya commanded, her weapon trained on the commander's center mass. The man was older than the other criminal she had encountered, probably in his 50s, with the bearing of someone accustomed to authority and violence. He looked at Maya with curiosity rather than fear, suggesting that he understood more about her capabilities than she had expected. "You must be the Apache nurse who's been causing problems for our Denver operations," he said calmly. "I have to admit, your reputation doesn't do justice to your actual skills. Who hired your organization to kidnap me?" The commander smiled, but continued destroying files on his computer. "That information is worth more than my life. But I will tell you that you've made some very powerful enemies, and eliminating our operation won't protect you from what's coming next." Maya heard vehicles approaching the warehouse from multiple directions. Either federal backup was arriving early, or the criminal organization had called for reinforcements. Either way, her window for gathering intelligence was closing rapidly. "Give me the client information, or I'll make sure you don't live to see whatever's coming next." "You won't kill me," the commander said confidently. "Your methods suggest military or law enforcement training, and professionals like you don't execute unarmed prisoners." Maya realized he was correct about her reluctance to commit murder, but wrong about her willingness to use violence for information extraction. Elena's teachings had included techniques for interrogation that were extremely effective without being lethal. She applied pressure to nerve clusters in the commander's shoulder, causing intense pain without permanent injury. "I won't kill you, but I can make you wish I had. Give me the client information." The commander's confidence cracked as Maya demonstrated her knowledge of pressure point manipulation. Within minutes, he provided contact information for the people who had hired his organization to kidnap her, along with details about similar contracts they had fulfilled over the past year. "Federal agents approaching the building," Morrison reported through Maya's earpiece. "You need to extract immediately." Maya secured the intelligence she had gathered and began moving toward her planned exit route. The warehouse facility was now under her control, with all security personnel neutralized and critical evidence preserved for federal investigation. But the real threat remained active somewhere beyond Denver, and Maya knew that eliminating one processing facility wouldn't stop the people who wanted her dead. As she prepared to leave the warehouse, Maya reflected on how completely her life had changed since that encounter in the hospital parking garage. The quiet nurse who had wanted nothing more than anonymity and professional success had become someone capable of dismantling criminal organizations through violence and tactical superiority. Elena Crowfeather would have been proud of her granddaughter's evolution, but also concerned about the personal cost of embracing the warrior path completely. Maya understood that each operation took her further from the civilian life she had built and closer to becoming the kind of person her enemies already believed her to be. The vehicles outside were definitely federal agents rather than criminal reinforcements. Maya could see Detective Morrison coordinating with FBI personnel, preparing to secure the warehouse and process the rescued victims. Her unauthorized operation had been successful, but she knew that federal agencies would have questions about her methods and concerns about her future activities. Maya slipped out of the warehouse through a service entrance, avoiding contact with federal agents who might want to restrict her movements or question her involvement in the operation. She had gathered the intelligence she needed to track down the people who had targeted her, but using that intelligence would require resources and capabilities that went beyond what she could accomplish alone. The war against her enemies was far from over, but Maya had proven to herself and them that she was no longer the vulnerable target they had initially identified. The next phase would require different tactics and possibly different allies, but she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her grandmother's spirit seemed to whisper approval in the wind as Maya disappeared into the Denver dawn, no longer running from her enemies but moving toward the final confrontation that would determine whether she could ever return to the life she had built or would have to create something entirely new from the ashes of her former existence. The penthouse office overlooked downtown Chicago like a throne room built of glass and steel. Maya stood across from Vincent Torino, the man whose organization had destroyed her quiet life and forced her transformation into someone she barely recognized. 3 months of tracking leads from Denver to Detroit to Chicago had brought her to this moment of final confrontation. Torino was younger than she had expected, probably in his early 40s, with the polished appearance of a legitimate businessman. His office contained no obvious signs of criminal activity, just expensive furniture and artwork that suggested success through legal enterprises. Only his eyes revealed the predatory nature that had made him wealthy through human trafficking and contract killing. "Miss Crowfeather," Torino said, using her Apache surname with deliberate emphasis. "I have to admit, I didn't expect our business relationship to require a face-to-face meeting. Most of our clients are satisfied with our services without needing personal explanations." Maya remained standing near the office door, her positioning calculated to provide multiple escape routes while maintaining visual control of the room. Elena's teachings had been explicit about never allowing enemies to control the tactical environment during negotiations. "Mr. Torino, I'm here because your organization made a fundamental error in target selection. You assumed I was a vulnerable hospital nurse who could be easily eliminated. Instead, you discovered I was someone capable of dismantling your entire Denver operation." Torino smiled, but his expression held no warmth. "Yes, your reputation has grown considerably over the past few months. The FBI task force investigating our activities speaks highly of your investigative techniques, though they're less enthusiastic about your methods. Who hired you to kidnap me?" "That's privileged information, Miss Crowfeather. Client confidentiality is essential to maintaining trust in our industry." Torino walked to his window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. "However, I can tell you that your situation involves interests much larger than personal vendettas or local business disputes." Maya had spent weeks preparing for this confrontation, gathering intelligence about Torino's organization and personal vulnerabilities. The federal investigation she had triggered in Denver had provided some protection, but she knew that legal prosecution was too slow and uncertain to guarantee her safety. "Mr. Torino, I'm going to give you one opportunity to provide the information I need. After that, our conversation becomes significantly less pleasant." Torino turned back toward her, his casual demeanor replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Miss Crowfeather, I think you misunderstand your position here. You're standing in my office in my city, surrounded by my people. Your Apache warrior training might have been sufficient for dealing with street-level criminals in Denver, but you're operating in a different environment now. Maya heard movement in the hallway outside the office. Torino's security team was positioning themselves to cut off her escape routes, confirming that this meeting had been a trap from the beginning. But Elena's training had prepared her for situations where enemies controlled the territory and resources. "Mr. Torino, my grandmother taught me that the most dangerous enemies are those who underestimate their opponents until it's too late to correct their mistake." Maya moved with explosive speed, using techniques that combined traditional Apache combat methods with modern tactical training. Torino's confidence evaporated as he realized she wasn't the cornered victim he had expected, but a predator who had deliberately entered his territory to eliminate a threat. The office door burst open as security personnel responded to sounds of conflict, but Maya had already secured Torino as a human shield while positioning herself defensively behind his desk. The tactical situation had reversed completely within seconds, transforming Torino from hunter to hostage. "Tell your men to back off," Maya commanded, her arm around Torino's throat in a chokehold that could render him unconscious or dead, depending on how much pressure she applied. "We're going to finish our conversation about client information." Torino signaled his security team to withdraw, his earlier confidence replaced by grudging respect for Maya's capabilities. "Miss Crowfeather, killing me won't protect you from my client. They have resources that extend far beyond my organization. Then you'd better give me their contact information so I can negotiate directly with them." Under pressure that threatened his life, Torino revealed that Maya had been targeted by a consortium of pharmaceutical companies threatened by research her grandmother had conducted decades earlier. Elena Crowfeather's work documenting traditional Apache healing methods had included discoveries that could undermine billions of dollars in patent protections for synthetic medications. "Your grandmother's research notes were supposed to be destroyed when she died," Torino explained. "But intelligence suggested you might have inherited her knowledge and documentation. Our client wanted you eliminated before you could publish or sell that information to competing pharmaceutical companies." Maya felt pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Elena had indeed left her extensive research notes, along with traditional knowledge passed down through generations of Apache healers. Maya had stored the materials without fully understanding their potential value or threat to established medical industries. "Who specifically hired you to eliminate me?" Torino provided names and contact information for pharmaceutical executives who had authorized her assassination through criminal intermediaries. The conspiracy involved respected medical research companies that had built their fortunes by suppressing traditional healing knowledge that could compete with their synthetic alternatives. Maya secured the intelligence she needed and prepared to leave Torino's office. Her mission was complete, but she knew that eliminating one intermediary wouldn't protect her from the pharmaceutical executives who viewed her grandmother's knowledge as an existential threat to their business model. "Mr. Torino, your organization is going to cease all operations against me immediately. You're also going to provide full cooperation with federal investigations into your human trafficking activities. If I discover you violated either condition, I'll return to finish this conversation permanently." 3 weeks later, Maya sat in her grandmother's house on the Mescalero Apache Reservation, reading through Elena's research notes with new understanding of their significance. The traditional healing knowledge documented in those pages represented alternatives to synthetic medications worth hundreds of billions of dollars to pharmaceutical companies. Detective Morrison had flown to New Mexico to update her on the federal investigation that was dismantling Torino's criminal network. The pharmaceutical executives who had hired the organization were facing criminal charges, though their lawyers were already negotiating plea agreements that would minimize their sentences. "Maya, the Justice Department wants to offer you a position with their organized crime task force," Morrison said. "Your skills and experience could help protect other people who've been targeted by criminal organizations." Maya looked out at the desert landscape where her grandmother had taught her to track animals, identify medicinal plants, and understand the warrior's obligation to protect innocent people. Elena's spirit seemed to whisper approval of the path her granddaughter had chosen. "Detective, I appreciate the offer, but I have different plans. I'm going to publish my grandmother's research and establish a foundation to preserve traditional Apache healing knowledge. Let the pharmaceutical companies try to suppress information that belongs to all humanity." 6 months later, the Elena Crow Feather Institute for Traditional Medicine opened in Albuquerque, with Maya serving as its director. The Institute's research had already identified dozens of traditional treatments that showed promise for conditions that were poorly addressed by conventional medicine. Maya had found her true calling, using her grandmother's knowledge to heal people rather than eliminate enemies. But she maintained her warrior training and tactical skills, understanding that protecting traditional knowledge from corporate exploitation might require both legal advocacy and more direct forms of resistance. The quiet nurse who had wanted nothing more than anonymity and professional success was gone forever, replaced by someone who understood that some battles were worth fighting regardless of personal cost. Elena Crowfeather's granddaughter had finally learned the most important lesson of Apache warrior tradition. True strength comes not from the ability to destroy enemies, but from the wisdom to protect what matters most for future generations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.